My name is Suzanne Anker, and I am chair of the Fine Arts Department at the School of Visual Arts. And I am very pleased this evening to introduce you to Aaron Gilbert, a very important painter who has really touched the tone of the crisis in our society. His paintings are very emotional. They're very conceptual in a certain sense, but they're also very well painted. And his work is unique in describing a kind of crisis that society is in right now, whether you like it or not. And I think that the subjectivity that Aaron expresses in his work is something we all need to think about. And of course, Aaron comes to us with a august background. He got his BFA from one of our competitors, the Rhode Island School of Design, and got his MFA from Yale University, which many of the students out there tonight would, of course, like to be accepted. And he has work in many permanent collections as well. The Whitney Museum of Art, the Studio Museum of Harlem, Brooklyn Museum, etc. But I think in many ways his work really captures the spirit of the situation of today. And it does so in painting, which is not an easy medium to express these ideas. So please join me in welcoming Aaron Gilbert to tonight's talk. Thank you.
Well, good evening. So maybe I'll just introduce with kind of a main overview of what I think about with my work. And really, so my paintings depict intimate narratives that are based often on people and events from my life or that I've observed in passing. A lot of times I'm combining multiple figures into one figure or rearranging what roles are played by different figures. But my work really engages with how people maintain their humanity within challenging, intimate relationships and in the presence of societal crisis. So the work examines variations of love, violence, and eroticism and the complexity of interactions that contrast personal intimacy and then these larger societal mechanisms. So a lot of times I'll start with a gesture that just really catches my eye, that seems very small or subtle, but feels like it could be a window into something a lot larger. And then just to speak a little bit about my process, typically I start either with just recording something I see or just drawing a quick sketch from my head. So initially there will be like kind of this single gesture, a single figure or two figures in one action. But then once that exists, I start thinking about how to build and weave a much fuller, denser world for those figures to exist in. And then I start thinking about who are these people and how can I activate them even more? You know, myself and the people I know are very complex, messy, interesting, contradictory people, and we embody so many different things at different times. And I think that's part of what makes all of us collectively beautiful and what makes our stories really dynamic and interesting. So these are things I start thinking about in the process when I'm building an image. And with this particular painting, this is more direct portraiture than a lot of my work is. So the woman is based on somebody in the neighborhood, and I see her frequently like late at night where she's outside in the cold. And I remember when COVID first popped off, then it was a little, maybe a month or so into it. I remember it was like a really cold night, and it was like 2 a.m. maybe, and I came outside and I saw blood on the sidewalk. And then I looked over and she was sitting on the sidewalk nearby and her hand was bleeding. And to me, that was just the coldest shit I've seen. Like, and just really thinking about somebody being outside all night in New York in the cold. Like, to me, that's like kind of a devastating reality, right? But at the same time, this man was helping her. And, I asked everything going all right. And he was like, yeah, I got this. We're good. So that was kind of the seed for this drawing. But really what I was thinking about over the following months with her was the degree of respect that different people in the neighborhood show her. So and what that really made me think about was the lives she lived before the current life I see her in now. Like, I see somebody in this chapter of their life, and it's very easy to kind of package them as this is you, but this is somebody who's lived many chapters and been different roles at different times. And so I was really thinking about that in kind of this longer sense. And the man, I use someone I know as the male figure. So this is ultimately a fiction, and that I've put different people into it. I've changed the gestures, but it's a fiction that's pulling from these different things that I've been thinking about and have really stayed with me. Where, ideally, a fiction can get at some truths that maybe are more, hit at something even more directly than just an accumulation of facts can deliver. This is an older piece, but I kind of liked it as a follow-up. So this was a painting I made. So there was a point where my mother talked to me about a miscarriage she had had that I hadn't been aware that she had had. And, it really struck me that she had gone through this kind of really private sorrow that I had been oblivious to, or I hadn't known the name of it, at least, even if I had sensed it. But after that conversation, it just kept coming up where I would hear different women around me mentioning a miscarriage they had had. And it really just struck me my utter cluelessness as a man, like just not realizing how like kind of constant of a reality that is in the lives of women, how present that is. And so I was just really thinking about what that connection is, that there is this profound eternal connection with somebody who the rest of the world doesn't share or acknowledge that connection is there, but it's as real as, and it's eternal, like love has this eternal thing that reaches outside of time. And so I was just thinking about how to picture that. This is a very recent painting. And part of it came from like this game I was playing with my daughter, where I'd be tipping her backwards and she would laugh and she'd say, do it again. And like we would keep, there was like this just joy, right? That's kind of one of the beautiful things about playing with young children, is that they have a real understanding and ability of how to just escape troubles and be present in like playing that is joyful. And So there's a lot more kind of personal family stuff that are wrapped up in it. And I would say that my experience with raising children has not been like a nuclear family experience by any stretch. And the mother of my children is somebody who's in it, who I have eternal love for, but we've really gone through like kind of all the ups and downs and difficult things that I think you can go through with another person when it comes to this very challenging thing of raising children in the world right now. And yeah, co-parenting. And there's something in embracing, having this presence and embracing the beauty that can be there in a situation that the world tells you you should accept as being imperfect or not living up to. There's this standard that if you don't hit it, you're not ready to have happiness yet. And so this painting was kind of just really like pushing that out of the way completely. It's like, no, love is something we need to insist on and always work for and be present in. And I just wanted a painting that was doing that for me. Maybe to encapsulate the last one. And also you can really learn to embrace the humanness and imperfections of both yourself and whatever people you're in a daily struggle with, and still find joy in life. And so that was really the last piece. Okay, so this one is called it's called like B-15 Night Shift or something like that. But it's B-15 bus. And I told myself I'm not going to make any COVID paintings. Definitely not. Like I thought that would be like the most, like I just had zero interest in it, but it's what I ended up doing anyways. And this was okay. So I guess when I first started riding the bus after COVID, it was so eerie. Like you'd get on the bus, it's empty. There's a plastic sheet, the yellow chains, and yeah, it was really surreal. And I was thinking about the bus drivers, right? And just really the selflessness involved when all of this was still at this point of being a complete unknown. That people were still like showing up to drive the bus. And just like the selflessness involved there, like to keep things running in that way. And so I wanted to do a painting where there was kind of a very personal interaction. So like this could be a partner, lover, neighbor, or just someone trying to either trying to hit on her or just show love or whatever. So that was kind of the starting point for this painting. There was something else I wanted to add, but I might have to come back to that. Okay, no, but this painting, that's it. This painting does kind of touch on this larger thing where like I'm really always thinking about like what, there's like these societal boundaries, that are dictated by kind of capitalism and society that's driven entirely by marketplace. And what I'm always reaching towards is how do we find and access power and agency that can circumvent that, the structure, and that can subvert the power structure that exists. So it's really, in a way, this could be like social realist painting, but in a way it's like an inverse of someone like Diego Rivera, where he's always who's a painter who I'm incredibly indebted to. But he's painting historically top down, like here's the workers, here's the hammer and the sickle, here's the conquistadors, the Aztec soldiers, it's all it's this top down telling of history. And what I'm interested in is something that activates us within the historical moment that we're in. So it looks at us as these beings who have this potential for profound transformation and for moving the world. And so all of these works I like to think of as really me meditating on where and how can we access power in society. So this painting, in a way, this is kind of very straightforward. But I wanted kind of a close, like erotic scene that just also had a lot of maybe delivered a very specific psychological space. Okay, this piece was called Ready, Willing, and Able. And I guess I was thinking about different times in my life, different people I've worked with, and there were a couple things. One was that space you're in when your family is very far away from you. And so you're only living kind of half a life because you're doing your work every day. You're showing all your hours are going to work to earn money, probably to send to family. But wherever your heart is, it's across some ocean, either literally or metaphorically. And I want kind of that intensity of a space of just men who are only working around other men all day long and kind of separated from whatever their real, like, intimate connections are. And I want kind of that maybe unnerving and dangerous intensity of that space to be in the energy of it. And so in a way, this is kind of I always like the work to be in this space of a bridge between kind of rational and metaphysical thinking. This is a painting of a woman who, well, it started with a woman I saw, but then I just inserted my mother kind of as the female figure. And, you know, I was thinking about that space of growing older where you hit a point where you're not going to have, life's not going to get easier. And yeah, maybe I'll leave this one for now. And this was kind of revisiting kind of that place, but also I was really thinking about, like, all these storefronts and kind of the energy they have and how that energy is different based on how much money you have, whether you're welcome in the spaces even. So this painting, I started the drawing. I worked for about 10 years, different shops in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, doing different kinds of fabrication and manufacturing. And this was a drawing that I started a version of this when I was finishing the last place I worked before I moved towards being an artist full time. And it's titled Conspirators. I kind of shifted it from where I worked to being the Amazon fulfillment center. It just kind of became a way. I guess it was present in my mind, thinking about the different labor things that were happening at Amazon, and just looking at that as kind of a litmus test for where manufacturing is going in the future. And I guess I wanted this real intensity of interaction between the two figures. So with this painting, um, I had two titles in mind for it. One was Song to the Siren, which eventually became the title, but the other one was just The Future. And I guess I was thinking about this kind of unfolding, ever-growing reality of mass displacement, particularly as it's tied to ecological disaster, but then also as it's tied to like different kind of economic things that are at play in the world. And I also was thinking in particular about a story that a coworker had shared with me about when he came to the United States I think he was 14 years old, and traveling by himself. And it was really this kind of intense, harrowing journey. And I was thinking about that complete surrender of being a child. And once you've paid somebody to help you, to help transport you, you are completely at the mercy of that figure. And so the ghost heads to the left and right of the older figure, we're kind of thinking about that in relation to um, this man who's carrying the child across the water as somebody who has who has possibly done very good things and very horrible things to different people, but possibly out of necessity even. And just that's like the reality we all carry, is that we have these different potentials. And so I wanted to really kind of heighten um, kind of that surrender to the universe in that space. This piece is called Summons, and so there were like a handful of different women who I think whose lives I've been in proximity to, who this piece kind of evolved from. Probably the most direct would be the mother of my children. Just remembering when our son was born, he was born prematurely by 2 months. So we spent a month staying at our Ronald McDonald House, and while he was in intensive care. And so she would have to pump her breasts because you couldn't just always be present with the child, wasn't with you. So you have to pump the milk and then store it for the nurses to give to your child. And there's kind of this very industrial cold removal. That was my sense of it, from something that something that we would associate with like this, being kind of like among the most intimate and warm and close and nurturing actions. So that was like the seed of the initial idea. And then I really also was thinking about her as a working mother and just all the other things that she's juggling in that moment. And I wanted to just show kind of that multiplicity, and just that place of being like a young parent with kind of an impossible amount of things to do in a day. So this painting is a very direct portrait of a young woman who I met, and in a way, like, she was this singularity where like all these things that I was kind of circling around in my work, it felt like she embodied them all simultaneously in like the most direct way possible, where she was she was a young expecting mother, and she had this Madonna and Child tattoo on her side. So there's kind of like this mix between the very direct who we are right now in this world, and then the mythological, like, and then at the same time, she had a ankle monitor. So she was like being surveilled by the state just thinking about that intrusion, that you do not have your privacy at this moment where you should be surrounded by warmth and support. But then at the same time, just like this loving, attentive, personal, intimate gesture can be present. This piece is titled Solomon and Whirlwind, and I wanted to, so this actually began with a photograph of, I have a 19-year-old son, and he had his sister was sitting on his shoulders, and I took a picture of them. And it really made me start to think about who he would be as a father. And he has like this really like warm, caring energy. And so I want to just kind of capture that and like kind of envision a future. And I think expanding it with the three children it felt like, thinking about like this whirlwind or something that's like continual, and raising children as this like kind of never ending thing that we get to ride, that we can potentially participate in. And yes. Okay. How am I doing on time, by the way?
Good. Yeah, you have plenty of time.
Okay, thank you. So initially, actually, this painting, I wanted to paint like an older couple who was kind of playing flirtatiously with each other. Like I like that idea of like kind of at the age of being grandparents, but having that have that spark or be present. And they don't look older. Like I kind of missed the mark with that. But then these other things kind of came into the story that just had an energy that I liked. Maybe I won't talk about this one very much and just leave it sit. So this is a painting of my son. This was made, he was probably 15, 16 years old. And it's modeled after the Fayum portraits, which are, to my understanding, the oldest surviving tradition of portraiture. They were made in Egypt with wax and caustic. And so I kept the scale and kind of the pose similar to that. And really one of the things that strikes me about those portraits so much is just how present those figures feel. Like it's like you're looking at somebody who could be sitting on the train next to you. And there's one of the things that really makes me love figurative painting and engage with it is it collapses time in a unique way. Like we have this there with a lot of other art forms, there's much more translation that happens through history by the time it reaches us. And there is something very direct with figurative painting that makes it so what became interesting to me was that this could sit on the wall next to one of those portraits and just have like this complete collapse of time. And also just kind of the power and beauty and just like freezing somebody in that way, like holding their presence. With this one, I was thinking of, this painting changed also as I was making it. But I was thinking about maybe a very specific reality of having to choose between two things. One is who we want to fight for in society in this larger way, and then who we want to protect and care for in terms of being our family, and how for a lot of people the reality is that there's very high consequences you pay, whichever path you take, and kind of the impossibility that you're faced with morally, in that way, or ethically in that way. And I think, yeah, I also was really thinking a lot about kind of what I see is the really like the sheer ugliness of the immigration policies that our country has right now, and how they've always been used. How immigration policy in the U.S. has always been a kind of a tool to serve a racist agenda. So this is jumping back further in time, and this was I want to include this to show kind of like how I worked through these initial preparatory drawings. So this is very small, like on 8.5 by 11 paper, probably about half that size. But what I was thinking about was, there's a George Tooker painting. It's a government bureau painting, and with his work, he's somebody who I've looked at and thought a lot about, and but in a way, I wanted to make a painting that was like the antithesis of his work. And I think with Tooker, he always has the institution as this crushing thing that ultimately overpowers the figures within the paintings. I think he's a tremendous artist, but ultimately there's this place where I see our voices diverging that's very substantial, where with his work, it's like the institutions always get the final checkmate on the figures. And what I want to do is make a painting that riffed off of his government bureau painting, but was the opposite, where the vitality of the figures was something that had this capacity to like circumvent and just serve the needs and desires of the people in the image above what the rules of the game were. And so this was my bank teller in Oakland, California, was the model for this painting. So in a way, this was like another painting that was like really direct portraiture. So moving further back, this was a painting I made. I had a pretty severe head injury about 11 years ago, where I got a metal plate put into my head, and it was something that really affected me for a year. It really messed me up, like cognitively, where there was just a lot of fluid and swelling from the bleeding that had happened internally. And eventually as that drained out, I'm very blessed to be kind of what I consider 100%. But at the time, there were just these different things I was working through. And also it kind of coincided with me separating, at the same time period, I was separating from my kid's mother. And so there were all these losses that were happening simultaneously. And with I wanted to, I was kind of interested in this idea of a phantom limb as this thing that like existed and held the psychological space of when it was still attached to the body, and just like how maybe the way that you're haunted by memories of something you've lost, and there's that presence of those things you've lost that don't leave you, they follow you around. And so this way, I guess the drawing really happened organically. I didn't think it through and then executed it, just kind of worked itself out. But just thinking about like this arm, this phantom limb that has this ability to still like interact with the tenderness that the two figures once shared, but aren't capable of sharing anymore. So I guess with this painting, I was really thinking about really it was about, it came from kind of thinking about and observing my in-laws at the time, where the way they would, even though the final drawing and the mood and so many things about the piece are not them, the initial kernel of an idea was really seeing this moment of like two people who've been together for, decades, who are able to kind of move in silence and make a meal together without even needing to talk about it. Just that place of knowing somebody so well and having been with somebody for so long that you can kind of move as one entity, but still be lost in your own thoughts. And then this is a painting of my daughter, and really there was this moment, like in maybe the first or second week of her life, where I was holding her, and I remember it was late. I'd come home from work and I was holding her for a minute, and she was really like a newborn infant at the time, and I was looking down at her and I was talking, and her eyes opened, and all of a sudden I realized that she was just looking really intently at my mouth and like studying it and like gazing really intensely at me. And, I became really aware that she wasn't just casually observing. Like there was something on inside of her where she was like, these noises coming from this man who's holding me are, have this whole other significance. It's not the same as like a car horn or like any other noise that's happening in the atmosphere or in the room. And she was just studying and just thinking about language itself as like this metaphysical thing. And then this new child, this new being in the world, also just kind of the magic, the presence in that of just like, here's this spirit being who now has joined us. And that first, like, kind of, in a way for me, that was like this, a very profound first meeting in a way. Even though like, yeah, and I think, looking back at my son, that was so many years earlier. I guess those moments were at different times and came in different ways. So I was really thinking about liberation theology at one point, and just kind of a brief overview. Liberation theology being this reinterpretation or this interpretation of Christian doctrine, where it's where the mandate that is taken from it is to bring about justice right here on earth, right now, in the community you're in, and that is the measure of things. I guess I was really thinking about okay, let me rewind this a little. One thing I do think about just tangentially is with with a lot of social movements now, there's kind of this disconnect from community. And I think in a certain way, I was looking back at a lot of the social movements that had happened, you know, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and a lot of them were actually religious-based, church-based. And one of the reasons that I point to with that is that those were these hubs or meeting places for entire communities across generations, and that there's access to wisdom and an access to utility and discipline that comes with that. And now, like, it tends to be driven much more so by like post-college graduates, but is disconnected from like older and younger generations. And even if you look at things more secular, like with the Black Panthers and the food drives and the breakfast programs and things like that, how kind of the importance of having this central organizing communal thing. And so with this piece, I wanted to have these 3 generations of women be present simultaneously. And I was also thinking, this was at a time where I was like really dominant in the news feed about children being locked in cages and held in cages at the borders in the US. And just looking at kind of that as being like kind of this extreme atrocity that's playing out in our society that we actually need to like immediately and directly address. And these questions of how to do that. So I guess one thing also, like with the mother, the woman wearing blue, like she's, I gave her like the nurse's badge. So I was thinking about how, I actually, at that time, I was still working full time, and just thinking about how, like, when you have these immediate family responsibilities, rent to pay, all these immediate things, there's these larger things you see in the world that you really want to be able to take on, but you're just chasing like these immediate needs. And so I wanted to place her kind of in that space. Oh, this is called Body Shot and Sippy Cup. And I just wanted kind of a playful, like erotic, like young parent image. Like they're at Applebee's right now. It's date night with a young kid with them. So there's a couple images I've done with the man with one arm, and I spoke earlier about the head injury, and around that time, it just kind of felt like in certain ways my life, all these things that I've been working towards seemed like they had kind of fallen through my hands, and I had all these anxieties about it. But then when I created this figure in my drawings, and then when I started drawing him more and more, he became somebody who, everything I was trying to cling to, everything I was terrified of losing, he already had lost. But he was living life with vitality, and he was enjoying life way more than I was, even though he had lost everything I was afraid of losing. And just making and visualizing somebody who had kind of faced and gone through all the fires that were keeping me up at night, it shifted in my mind how, like, it kind of was this release and way of letting go all these things that I was like clenching really tightly, but still they were slipping from my hand. And so that was really some liberating shit for me to do. And with him, so like him not having an arm, that was a way to take me and make a fiction of my life. And I made him older. I don't know. I used to have a Lincoln Town Car. It was my favorite car. So he's on a road trip with the Lincoln. This is a double portrait of two close friends of mine. And I'll leave it there. This painting is called How a Man Gets a Woman Back. And so again, I was kind of like, oh, in the top right corner is like a Polaroid photo of my ex. And I was kind of thinking about this. This was made at the time that this separation thing was like really kind of an intense anxiety for me. And I think for me, I'd always held on to like being a father and being present as this thing that it was like this clear marker or anchor for me psychologically that I was succeeding in this way. And I felt like if that shifted, it changed form or I lost it, I would just be like adrift in free fall. So the male figure actually is more my father than myself, but it was kind of me confronting fears I had around my father and then around fatherhood. But I guess I was thinking about this anxiety of like growing old alone. And yeah, that might be all I can think of for that. So this is based on a story, one of the stories I remember my grandfather telling me of just, he would say he remembered holding me as like a young baby and I would be lying on his chest, like kneading his chest hair with my hands. And I don't have a lot of stories from him, but that's one that kind of, like I liked it because it was like this warmth and this intimacy. This is a etching called Waterbed, and I think I think it's I don't know. I guess in a way it's self-explanatory, but really looking at like an erotic interaction as this kind of this thing that's got this like meditative, like it's this point of transcendence potentially, So with this one, I kind of want like this to make like a classic love scene. This is based on a Persian miniature titled Khosrow and Shirin. And it's about a love triangle that involves two men who are related and one ends up stabbing the other. And I wanted to kind of collapse the narrative and make all things present simultaneously. One thing John Berger says, he talks about like an absence of time and an absence of movement as being these two things that are inherent in painting. And painting does have this interesting relation to time where you can really play with formally if you, and the more you think about it kind of consciously as this structure where what are the different ways to have multiple moments of the same thing simultaneously present, and how does changing that and playing with that like activate the narrative in different ways. This is really a revisiting of the earlier painting that I showed. Yeah. And for my last slide, this is titled The New One, and it's a painting depicting birth. So the mother figure is clearly Dina, the mother of my children. And then the child is more not fully formed, like kind of out, and I wanted, there's this thing of like, I was thinking about birth as this moment where you're pulled out of one realm of reality and into the one that we are conscious of and are moving in right now. And so I want everything below the water to be like in that other place. And then what's coming out of the water is like this new alien being, like being pulled into the present moment we're in. And I actually made this when I was in grad school, and I remember it was on the wall at Crit, and one of the faculty said, "Aaron, you missed this huge opportunity." He was like, "There should have been a color shift, like a temperature shift, a huge shift with everything above the water and below the water." And I was like, "Oh shit, you're right." So make a note of that, I guess, painters out there. I think that would have been a nice way to have like kind of a shift of space psychologically. So, I mean, these all succeed and fail in all these different ways. But thank you all for listening to me. And if you have any questions, please ask.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. That was really terrific. I think there were a lot of things that you touched upon that are really not touched upon in conversation, with things like love, violence, and eroticism, the kind of sense of psychological biography becomes another aspect. What interests me about your work, and tell me if I'm wrong, is there is in many cases a kind of racial ambiguity
Yeah.
in this work. Not in all cases, but in some cases, with a focus on the eyes and a focus on the hands, which are quite beautifully elongated. So can you talk about these pieces at all in terms of racial ambiguity?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. So my background is a mix of white and Latino, like Cuban, Irish, Mexican, and Jewish. And then my larger, and then there's all the admixtures within that even, right?
Sure.
And so there's kind of a liminal way that I kind of have experienced the world in that respect. And you know, I think one of the luxuries that have come with that is that being kind of embraced and treated as family in a lot of different communities and rooms. And but I think a larger thing that I think about a lot with the work is the way that these histories really are always present and impacting even our personal interactions. Like whether we're at work or whether it's in a relationship we're in, you know, there's just all these different ways we're confronted with and constantly, you know, there's different ways they really weigh on the, you know, the immediate moment and interaction we're in. And so I'd say with every painting, maybe I'm thinking about it in a different way, or in a, you know, like I don't, it kind of never stays the same, and nor should it. Like I think the most, yeah, like I think if it's something I approach in a way that's formulaic, then it's really doing a disservice to like the gravity and reality of the world we're in. And I don't know if that answered your question fully, but I think with each painting, then I begin to think about how like larger things, like larger social histories are present and exerting power beyond what the intent and desire of the figures themselves are.
I agree, and that does answer my question, and it's a very good answer. I think that, you have managed to use painting as a media to deal with many underlying issues of social crisis, which is not an easy thing to do. Okay, so congratulations to you um, for um, for for bringing that to our attention. And let's now, Evan, are you around somewhere?
Yes, so we have to start out with, we have two questions. The first one is, your art seems to be inspired from specific moments that move you. Do you worry about translating the intensity of these moments into your painting? And the second question is, how did you make connections while in school to show your work at galleries now?
Okay, I'm gonna answer the first, and by the time I do that, I'll probably forget the second. So just hit me with that again when I'm done. The first was about translating the intensity of specific moments. Um, I think I'll always try to find what's the most essential thing that needs to exist in this piece, and always try to keep that in sight as I'm working on the piece. But ultimately I give myself the freedoms that a fiction writer, I think, operates from, which is there's something something essential that you find that does feel like it has a real weight and that you want the piece to serve. But all the other pieces within the image can and should be moved and reworked and rearranged and tested on that path. Like, this should be a journey into the unknown each time. And if nothing happened in the course of making the painting that surprised and changed what the initial, or alters what the initial plan is, then I feel that's actually a failure, because then it's like a conversation where I've spoken the whole time and haven't listened or received anything. And I think for me, the creative process is one that should really be honored in a way where it's like there's a poetry there and there's an openness and a kind of, it is about receiving and finding something that's larger than what you entered the situation with. And then the second question, making connections with galleries. When I was in grad school, there were my own personal experience. There were a number of galleries were kind of talking to me and interested in doing things while I was in school, and I wanted to wait till I was out of school. I just didn't think I was ready. Like, I thought I could make things that looked like real art product, and I could produce product and they would sell them and then call me frantically and say, we need 3 more because now this fair is coming up. And then we need this. And then we want to put you in this. So make more of this. And I'd just be kind of chasing, delivering something based on imitating an aesthetic. Like, you make one painting where you're like, I don't know what just happened, but this is the best painting I've made. This is amazing. And then you're like, how do I make 5 more that are like that? And imitating that aesthetic. And to me, that is like a recipe for to me that wasn't my path. Like that would have been like shortchanging this longer thing that I knew I wasn't ready. So I didn't show when I was in grad school. And then I left school, and that was 2008. So I had some work in a group show with a gallery that I really was excited about. And that was September of 2008. And that's when the housing market tanked. And so everything just kind of shut down there. And for a number of reasons, things were very quiet for years. Like they kind of slowly got quieter and quieter. And then I do a show here or there, but nothing that was really like kind of a full like body of work. So I had a good 10 years of being off the map, more or less, between grad school and exhibiting the way I am at the moment, thankfully. So I don't know. I hope y'all do better. I hope y'all find it easier than I did. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. And, being an artist is a leap of faith. And it goes in many directions over long periods of times. And I think your honesty about the fact that it took 10 years is commendable, because it takes 10 years. It takes time. And, this is the rest of your life. It is not just a flash in the pan and a commodity. So I think for the students out there listening, to think about the fact of what kind of artist you want to be and how long you plan on being relevant. So, the art world is very much a war zone. You get chewed up and spit out, and then you can get revived. But sort of showing too early is not to your advantage. And Aaron has talked to us about his way of doing things, and I think that the independence of the situation will do him well.
I definitely appreciate what you're saying. I will add, though, I did have the benefit of showing at different times early on, like even immediately after grad school, I had a show. I said yes to, when school was over, I said yes to whatever I could, basically. And before grad school, there was a gallery in Providence that really would show my work, and that was a huge boost, just because it kind of helped the ecosystem around me, where I was a father before I entered undergrad. And so just having this kind of affirmation where people around me, I think, treated with a different respect what I was doing. And I will say one thing I've observed is that people who did have momentum coming out of school tended to be way more likely to stay in the art making thing over the long haul. So it's a paradox. I think, do everything you can to get momentum and have it, but know what's a compromise to the growth that you actually need to undergo creatively. And don't know that, find that, know yourself, and know that your path is more important. I think everything is individuated when it comes to being an artist. There's not a formula for success that translates from one person to the next. So do your own soul searching. It's like your own private journey. Yeah.
Well, great. I think that you have given our students great advice about this, and each case is a special case. There is no formula, and you just sort of, follow the way you think your sensibility leads you. And, life is about chance as well. And you can't predict certain things. The odds may be in favor at a certain time and place, at a certain graduate school, for example. But that could all change. That could all change at any time. And I think that anyone who becomes an artist is comfortable with this uncertainty that one has to face in this profession. Well, I'm not going to say any more. It's enough for me, okay? Evan, any other questions?
Yeah, we have a few more. One from Reza is, your work show resilience and transparency that touch on multiple planes of life. You show this through past and present interactions. Is the future an aspect as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the future is the driving reason, I think, for all of it, really. Like I mean, I think the things that drive me as a person are all like future oriented, like looking at like what inner transformation do I need to undergo to manifest who I am supposed to be, right? And like I've kind of alluded to it, but the work tends to be meditations on that. And so, yeah, I think the future is what kind of more than I really, really think about what kind of world are we passing on to our children, and we better find a way to start acting collectively. And where do we find power right now? And I think there's just this general known consensus that we have to start reaching in a much more direct way. And so this work is really affirming that begins like in how we move through the world.
One technical question. How long do you work on a painting before you deem it finished?
I like to say it takes a month to myself. That just gives me a rough indicator. This one was one of the quickest. It was like a week and a half. And it's one of the ones I'm happiest with, period. So I just kind of hit this sweet point of momentum when this came out. There was no interruptions and it just flowed. My process, I kind of work out a drawing and really start to, like, I try to work out as many of the details compositionally with the drawing so that when I move to the painting, I can really be like tuning the color and have the paint itself be something that creates like an atmosphere that has its own charge, that puts out its own frequency. And, that's the point where working with paint, you're moving beyond language. And so that's where it can kind of be an unknown. It's not about describing objects with paint, but it's about like, there's an alchemy there. And sometimes things get reworked and repainted 3 or 4 times just to like shift the colors to where they all kind of vibrate off each other. So
we have another question on perspective. I find that your paintings are almost painted with the view at the front horizontally. Why is that, since there are many other visual angles to highlight something?
Wait, a view of the front horizontally. I think there's a dynamic I want to have exist between the viewer and the scene. And I guess the way I work these out does have to do with the proximity I place the viewer to the action. But beyond that, yeah, I'm not sure how else to answer that off the top of my head.
Sure. I think that's about it.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming this evening to join in our discussion, and thank you especially Aaron, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to speak again, and that you can come visit us at SVA to our amazing fine arts building. And I think that many of the issues raised tonight will continue on and be extended, because as your work points to, the idea of society being in crisis is where we're living now. So thank you, and we will be in touch. Okay.
Good night, everyone.